Good morning, folks. Today I'm actually doing work on my own personal truck, my 2003 F350 6-liter diesel. I had a 4x4 issue. I'd put it in four-wheel drive for high, and then when I wanted to get onto the freeway, I wanted to go back into two-wheel drive. So I'd pull over, put my foot on the brake, shift into two-wheel drive, and it wouldn't shift out. So I would shift into four-wheel low in hopes of going back into two-wheel drive and getting out. But it would shift into four-wheel drive low, and it wouldn't shift out. So at which point I would be stranded. I couldn't get out. It ended up being the two-wheel drive relay was bad, along with the range indicator, the shift range indicator. Here's the actual Ford part number if you need. The item costs about, off the top of my head, I think it was about $164. If I was going to have Ford do it, it would have been a pretty penny more. So for this job, list of tools I recommend. Obviously, to remove the pan, I believe those were 10 millimeter. I recommend a roll pin kit, because you are going to remove two roll pins, king pins, or whatever you may call them. Go ahead and get you a punch. This one here is, I don't see a number on it. Just get a punch that's the same diameter of the king pin. Get you a small set of low profile needle nose pliers. This will make sense later. And just a small ball peen hammer. You don't need anything monstrous. As a backup, you want to have the smallest easy out that you may have, and then just a good set of drill bits. This will make sense a little bit later. But to cover it now, while I'm out, if you happen to tap your kingpin in the wrong direction, because one of these only comes out one way, then what you're going to need to do is get you a good drill and a small drill bit. And I actually had to drill into my kingpin. Let's see. You have to be so careful. You break this drill bit off in there, you're kind of screwed. I ended up drilling into my kingpin, and then I used my smallest easy out, tapped it in, and I'm telling you, I just made small rotations. And lo and behold, I managed to get the kingpin to spin, and I just kept going, easing it, and finally I got the whole kingpin out, thank God. So I'm going to cover this guy here. It comes off with two 8mm bolts. This end is going to be connected to a cylinder that obviously, as you move it into drive and reverse and all that, it actually will control the direction of the vehicle. This end here has a long rod, and I believe that's for your overdrive assembly. It's a long rod, and the other end will have like a cylinder with a spring assembly. So it's all important that you get it in there the same way you took it out. There's going to be one plug that you remove off of here. And let's go underneath the truck so I can give a brief description of what I ended up doing. I thought I was going to be able to take care of it last night with 1 hour before I go home, but I didn't have any info on this particular job, so. All right. So, my new one is already installed. I didn't have time yesterday to cover a video, but I wanted to make a video that maybe you guys might have gotten in a little too deep like I did. I think mine is the 5R series transmission on these. Correct me if I'm wrong, I do apologize. So for this job, I went ahead and bought a whole case of fluid from Ford while I was there. I bought a new filter. My transmission takes the SP at Sierra Paul SP fluid and Mercron SP. Yeah, Mercron SP. There we go. So here's the new one. It's already in. It's plugged in. So that little lever is going to go into this cylinder. I would just recommend not pulling that cylinder out because if debris gets in there, it could score the inside of that. So here's one kingpin that needs to come out. That one you can tap all the way through, no problem. Now if you notice this kingpin here, I felt the top and I did not feel a protruding area where it would go all the way through. But I thought, well, it's probably just covered in dirt or whatnot. And I looked with the mirror and I thought I saw an indicator that it was going to go all the way through, but it didn't. So I tapped it and it went flush into this little drilled out crevice. And I tried those low profile pliers that I showed you earlier. I tried everything and I could not get it out. So at this point I'm kind of freaking out, but I'm just like trying to control my breathing because I didn't want to have to be in here with a machinist trying to figure out, I always think worst case scenario, and I'm sure a lot of you folks do too. It's scary. It's your own pickup. So what I did was, it's protruding out now, and this is how you're going to want to install the new one. Protruding out a little ways, maybe just long enough for you to be able to grab it with pliers in the future if you ever need to. So this sucker here, let me see if I can get my other light on it. Now the reason all this needs to come out, you don't need to remove that linkage or anything like that, but you need to undo this kingpin here in order to, and then you're going to want to undo that kingpin as well. So both kingpins. When you undo this one, it'll allow this shaft to come out more towards your four-wheel drive shaft, which will allow the whole assembly, this whole assembly here, to come out and be able to come out, because that shaft feeds into there, and then the shaft will feed into your range indicator switch. Now, the reason this has to be changed is this talks to your 4x4 switch inside the cab, and and it's kind of like the sensor for your 4x4 to be able to say, hey, because there's the motor, to be able to shift it into four-wheel drive high, four-wheel drive low, or back into two-wheel drive. So if all three items aren't talking to one another, then you're going to be stranded on the side of the road. So I'm going to cover this as well. Your 4x4, if you're stranded somewhere and you can't get the sucker into two-wheel drive high or two-wheel drive low, it's stuck in two-wheel drive, or it's stuck in four-wheel drive low. Here's what you do, folks. So I'm going to try to mock this motor up there really quick just so I can kind of give you an idea what to do. Let's see. So here's your motor. It's going to be bolted up there with 3 10mm bolts. There's those 3 10mm bolts. And it's going to have 2 plugs going to it. If you're stranded on the side of the road, go ahead and remove those 3 10mm bolts, at which point slide the motor off. Now I know a lot of you guys might not have these tools, like a 10mm ratchet or a wrench or a crescent wrench. But if you ever plan on traveling far distances, just carry a couple tools with you. And I was lucky. So I took a crescent wrench and I went ahead and I turned this shaft. Oh Lord. Just remember, if you're in two-wheel or if you're in four-wheel low, you have to turn it 2 clicks to get it into two-wheel drive. And if you can't get it into two-wheel drive the first time, just then try the opposite direction. But if my memory serves me right, I turned it clockwise. And I did that 2 clicks. And your four-wheel drive shaft is still going to move but at which point it won't engage the hubs. I could be wrong about that, but yeah, no, I'm right. See, I'm turning this right now, and it's... But anyway, that allowed me to get home when I was stranded. So I took it to Ford because I couldn't find problems with my scanner. It didn't throw a code, and that's when they found the two-wheel drive relay. Directional relay was bad, and then they said that I needed to change this part. And while I'm in there, I recommend just go ahead and just drain the fluid and change out that filter. It's preventative maintenance. But there's that shaft. Let me get better light. So that shaft will go, there's only one way. It's that long shaft, and I believe that's for your like overdrive. And I could be wrong. But yeah, it clips. It only goes in that groove one way right there. And then when you put it back in, you got to make sure it pushes that ear over. It'll fit in there one way. And then whenever you put the system in, or the part in, just go ahead and go inside the cab. Don't start the vehicle, but just move the move your column, you know, put it in reverse, neutral, drive, first, second, third. Make sure it all clicks freely. If there's any binding of any way, shape, or form, then more than likely you've done something wrong down here. The system, like I said, is held in by two 8mm bolts. You'll have these king pins here. Replace the king pins if you, I would recommend it. It'll just allow enough the proper tension because you don't want one of these bad boys falling out when you're driving or about to go to work or whatever. It would just suck. I can't think of anything else. You can reuse the gasket. Just clean it up really well. Clean the magnet at the bottom of the pan. I'm going to drain all this fluid. This is just from what's been dripping all night long. Whenever you go to tap this kingpin out, it's in close proximity to this solenoid. Make sure you can see how fragile that is. So obviously a punch is going to be long and it's going to be in the direct path. So just be very careful. Take your time. Don't rush it. You're going to definitely need more than an hour on this. Probably a couple hours. You just want to take your time, folks. You don't want to be in any trouble like I was last night. I just figured I could knock it out in a hurry and be good to go. But again, good kingpin set. The range indicator, this one for 03 F350 6-liter, it is inside the pan. Here's the part number. Get you a punch, small set of needle nose pliers, ball peen hammer, drill, and a small bit that'll go inside of a kingpin. Take your time, do not break that bit off, you'll be in trouble. Good set of drill bits, small easy out, and hopefully everything goes better than it did for me. I mean, once I figured out what I was doing, things went rather well. That fluid that you'll need for an 03 6-liter is Mercron SP. And like I said, I went to Ford. I bought it by a case. Between the filter and the case, I was at $108. For the early 03, there is a secondary filter for the transmission, and that is, oh Lord, it's under there in the dark. Anyway, it's a round canister, passenger side, up above the 4x4 axle. You'll see it. 23 or 22 millimeter socket to remove that. Be careful, that housing is paper thin and they're hard to get. All right, folks. Hopefully that works out for you. Take your time. I think you'll be just fine. It was a pretty fun, interesting job. little expensive for that assembly, if you ask me, but that's just something to look out for if your four-wheel drive isn't working and you're stumped. That switch right there talks to your 4x4, and if all the relays and the electrical are fine, then that's something to keep in mind. So have a good day, folks. God bless.